Hello, everyone. I'm Jeremy McGovern. I'm the conference director of the International Hoof-Care Summit and want to welcome you to this live Q&A. One of the great things I think we offer at the Hoof-Care Summit each year is there's a lot of things that are reliable and repeatable, the trade show, some of the speakers you see, but I think one of the nice features we have each year is bringing in new speakers and certainly not only new for the Hoof Care Summit, but new to the States. And that's why I'm really thrilled with you coming this year, Kate.
Thanks very much. I'm really delighted to be able to come over and chat with all you Farriers over in the US and the world, really.
Yeah. So what we'll do, we'll talk a little bit about what you're going to do with your lectures. And
Sure.
Just so everybody's familiar with the schedule with the Hoof Care Summit, of course, we begin on Tuesday, January 24th. And that day has a combination of how-to classrooms. We have a really great hands-on session with Mustad. Kaywa has another educational session. And then we get into the full agenda into the afternoon. And of course, the roundtables are in that evening. Then, Kate, we'll have you lecture. Your first lecture with us will be Wednesday morning in the general session room. Can you tell us a little bit about that talk?
Yeah, so my first talk is going to be on the hoof accelerations that are experienced by galloping racehorses on different types of surfaces and when they're wearing different shoeing conditions. So this was a study that we did over in the UK at the British Racing School. It was called Shoe Assessment for Equine Racing. So the hope is that we'll be able to better understand how different shoeing conditions and surface types influence how they influence the movements of the racehorses, so we can improve the conditions with regards to performance and also for injury as well. So in my first talk, I'm going to be talking about hoof accelerations and how they vary at impact and at foot off depending on shoe and surface types. And that will sort of form the basis really for the talks I'll give throughout the week. So the following day, I'm going to talk about how the hoof movements are related to the upper body movements of the horses and the jockeys. So we put sensors not only on the hooves, but also on the horse's girth and also on the jockey's pelvis, which allowed us to measure the displacements, the amount of movement in millimeters in 3 directions, both at the girth and at the jockey's centre of mass. So we're looking at how they vary depending on the surface type and also on the shoeing condition, as we did with the hoof accelerations on the first day, and trying to relate the two. And then I think on the final day, the talk will go back to looking at the hoof movements again, and specifically looking at the breakover or the push-off phase of the stride cycle, which is really important for propulsion. And we're looking at that in the horses galloping and seeing how the horses' movements compared to other animals as well, such as cheetahs and greyhounds, when they're pushing off at high gallop speeds, and how the front and hind end are interrelated, and how the loading changes potentially as the horses progress from intermediate gallop speeds to top gallop speeds, and how the shoeing conditions affect the proportion that you see in the galloping horses.
Okay, yeah. What got you interested into this research?
So I've always loved horses and been around horses, and particularly I've been interested in how horses move and their biomechanics. So in the UK, I was taking a course alongside my PhD in a master's course in equine science, and my PhD was in a different area. My PhD was in geology, actually, not horses. But I was keen to get my own horses and be a bit more clued up and not reliant on people around me for information. So I took this master's course, and within that, I was particularly interested in the biomechanic aspects. And then a job came up at the RVC that was this project looking at shoes for racehorses, how it affects their gait, their locomotion on different tracks, and how farrier interplayed with all this. So I applied and got it. So it was a bit of luck, I guess, along the way to get into this field, because my background had been quite contrasting, really. But yeah, I love it. It's really interesting, and it's kind of spun into other studies as well. So I started with racehorses, and shoeing, but now we're looking at back movement in racehorses and other horses as well, and applying the same sorts of technology to understand the movements of horses in more detail, using more sensors in the upper body, not just at girth and pelvis. So this study that I presented at the Hoof Summit is sort of a foundation for more work that's kind of followed on within sort of the biomechanics field.
And I think an interesting thing about your work and some of the other things you've done at the RVC is the relationships you've formed with farriers like Peter Day. And I guess when you look at work like this, how do you I guess keep it practical or help farriers to understand what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so Peter Day was a big help with this study and sort of devising the equipment that we needed to secure the sensors to the hooves, because he had the sort of practical skills and knew which sort of adhesives and stuff would be suitable for the horses. So we were consulting farriers sort of all the way along with how to make the study safe and suitable for the racehorses. But also, so we also worked with James Coburn and his team of apprentices. There were 3 lads, Henry, Dan, Liam, over in Newmarket, who were great. And they sort of had input on what shoes they thought would be most relevant to assess within the industry. So we didn't just pick any old shoe. We spoke to them and said, well, most horses in the UK will race in aluminium shoes, but they'll train in steel. So those were 2 types we were particularly keen to try because they're the most commonly used. But we also thought, well, we might as well try the barefoot condition, because there's some rules in the UK in particular that say you can't race. Well, you have to be fully shod to enter races, but also a lot of trainers are against racing barefoot on turf. So we were interested to measure that to see, well, does it produce different hoof accelerations or breakovers to the other conditions? And what is it about that puts people off? And then there's also lots of rubber shoes and plastic shoes out there. So we were keen to kind of include something a bit different to say, these are what's done, but what could be adopted by the industry. And initially we just tried an imprint shoe, but we decided, it's not very applicable to racing. It's quite a faff to attach, and I think it tends to be used, you can probably correct me because I'm not a farrier, but it tends to be used for, say, laminitic cases. So we did try that in one case, but then we decided that probably wasn't the most applicable to the industry. So then we found this shoe that's called a glue shoe with the aluminium core and a rubber surround. And that we thought, well, you can mould it to the horse's hoof shape or conformation. So that was quite nice. And we initially tried gluing it on, but then we thought, well, for consistency with the other shoes, maybe it's better to nail it on. And we've got the same sort of attachment method across the board for the comparison. So we sort of evolved the study to try and make it as sort of easy and relevant as possible to the farrier industry. We wanted conditions that people would want to use and be able to use. So I think along the way we made sure that the farriers working specifically with racehorses in particular were on board with what we were picking, and they thought it was suitable.
Okay. And of course, as I mentioned, the schedule, we run Tuesday through Friday, and your lectures are on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So you'll be with us the entire week. What are you looking forward to at the summit?
Well, I think it'll be great. One thing to get feedback from farriers across the world as well on the work that we've been doing, and their criticisms or thoughts for how we can improve moving forward would be great. But I'm also keen to hear what other people are saying. And like I noticed you've got, isn't there a talk on quarter horses? I thought that would be quite interesting. It's like how you're shoeing for different disciplines. So we don't really have any quarter horses in the UK, not very many. But when I was over seeing Hila and Renata recently, there's loads of quarter horses in Calgary. They're doing like barrel racing, all sorts of stuff. And I was like, well, it'd be interesting to see how their hoof conformation is different, what sort of shoes they use for those horses. And also with different climates, like isn't there someone from Australia coming and speaking as well? So I think looking at how different people shoe in different countries depending on the surfaces and the climates and things will be really cool. Looking forward to that.
I think that's one of the nice features of the summit too is, there's, I guess, a couple of presentations on quarter horses. There's Blaine Chapman's about shoeing quarter horses at the 4-6s, but then our first presentation will be a panel discussion of farriers who worked at the Quarter Horse Congress, which is a big show in the States that's been going on for decades. And so I think there's a really nice balance of insight from seasoned farriers and practical input from that time and fun stories to hear, and then juxtapose that with cutting edge stuff that you're doing and some of the other presenters are doing.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice, as you say, like there's got all the farriers who are really practical and hands-on, and that's not the side that I know as much about. So it'll be good to hear from them about that side, and then hopefully how they can apply research techniques to like objectively test what they're doing if they want. So I think there'll be some good overlap between us.
We do have a panel discussion with Simon Moore and then Doug Anderson and Tim Shannon, two farriers from the States who went through the RVC program that Renata had helped launch, Dr. Renata Weller. So I think too, I'm interested to see what the feedback will be for that, with more farriers wanting to either be involved with programs or the fellowship of the Worshipful Company, things that will encourage them to conduct research, but even on their own interest. Yeah.
And also I was be interested in all the sort of orthotic and therapeutic shoeing. So I'm quite keen to, in the future, to be measuring like how different shoe types affect the gait, and like orthotics, for example, in foals. Like a lot of thoroughbred foals have limb deformities, and having these sort of foal super fast extensions and things like this. And I think it'd be cool to be able to measure that and see how that actually affects the gait symmetry and things like this in those horses.
Yeah. Well, I know we're super excited about having you come over and
Thanks.
Thrilled that you're going to be there all week. And that's another great thing is, if somebody goes to your talk, if they have questions, you'll be there for the rest of the week. So it's a great time to check in with you and find you in that hallway networking and pepper you with questions.
Yeah, it would be great. Definitely.
Looking forward to having you, and thanks for joining us, Kate.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to being over in America.